Hello and welcome to today's event GAIA-X Startups. My name is Luisa and I will be your moderator for the upcoming hour. Today is about decision makers and practitioners discussing together how GAIA-X can and should contribute to the design of a sovereign data infrastructure reflecting European values. We as TechQuartier operate in this ecosystem on a daily basis. As you will know, if you follow our activities in the context of our research projects SafeFBDC and Eurodat. We are thus caught deep in the debate between value creation and wishful thinking, between bureaucracy and agility, between large corporations and startups. Against this background, I'm very much looking forward to today's event and especially to our amazing guests. Before I'll introduce them to you and get to the agenda, I would like to hand over to our co-host, Ray from OVHcloud, for a short introduction.
Hi everyone, Ray. I'm Startup Program Manager at Central Europe at OVHcloud. Welcome to our event, GAIA-X Startups. We organized this event to give you a pragmatic overview of how to get involved with GAIA-X, as it will also be you, the startups, who will be accelerating this great European initiative. OVHcloud is the leading European cloud provider and founding member of GAIA-X. Through our startup program, we offer startups vouchers of up to 100,000 euros, technical support, marketing, event and communication activities, and of course, access to our global ecosystem, such as business angels, accelerators, venture capital, but also other ecosystem stakeholders. Enjoy the session and have fun, and also please feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. It was a pleasure to work with you on this. Now, in order to get started, let me quickly outline the agenda for today's event. We'll kick off the event with a keynote from Pierre Gronlier. Pierre is the Chief Technology Officer of the GAIA-X AISBL. The GAIA-X European Association for Data and Cloud, AISBL, represents the core organizational structure of the GAIA-X vision. It is an international non-profit association under Belgian law and has been founded with the goal to develop the technical framework and operate the GAIA-X Federation services. Pierre, it is a pleasure to have you with us here today. The second keynote will be given by Kraemer. Peter is the head of the German GAIA-X Hub, and in his keynote he will focus on the structure, the organizational structure of the German hub, and why it is important to engage here as a startup. Up next will be our panel discussion with Jörg Gottschlich, Emma Wehrwein, Ronnie Reinhardt and Stefan Schaefer. The speakers of the panel discussion will introduce themselves after the keynotes. Questions from the audience are welcome at any time. Please make use of the chat function in YouTube to list them, and we will cover as many as we can during the next hour. We'll now start with our keynotes. Pierre, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I'm super happy and very delighted to be here. So today's presentation is to describe what are the latest improvements in the GAIA-X architecture and to share with you the latest outcome that we've come up with for enabling the GAIA-X ecosystem. So there is, to start with, we need to come back a bit at the fundamentals and the basics that were the ground base for creating GAIA-X, the European value. So coming back to the European Treaty, you can read the European value, but also the important is how we can translate that into a few keywords in the IT world. So self-determination, privacy, transparency, security, and fair competition will be considered as European value applied to the IT domain. With those definitions, when we have GAIA-X, it was always about user who actually let control to user who actually get controls back. And at the middle, we have this trust and sovereignty keyword. I believe it's extremely important that we define and try to give a definition of those two keywords to see how they can be enabled. Trust, that's your ability to believe someone will be able to do something. For that, you need to do a risk assessment. And for doing this risk assessment, you need to have access to fair, clear, practitioner information. I will even add you need to have access to verifiable information. Sovereignty is probably a bit misused because sovereignty applies to kingdom, to states, and not to public organization. But sovereignty, that's the ability to exercise your control over your resources. And there is a key fundamental here. Trust and sovereignty are users' choices, meaning that we can enable you, help you to build trust, but we cannot sell trust. We cannot give you trust, and we cannot give you sovereignty. This is why for Gaiax, one of the top 3 key enablement we have, so I will come with 3 milestones for the first iteration of Gaiax, that's to provide a framework allowing you to take educated decision based on European value, the European value we saw earlier. It means that a non-European user who adhere to the European value might want to have sovereign decision about their infrastructure and how they want their data to be used, and not necessarily European sovereignty. So European value, extremely important. For doing that, we want to enable those ecosystems, and this is why we have this overarching GAIA-X. So we have one GAIA-X decentralized ecosystem that federates autonomous GAIA-X ecosystems. And it's very important to read the veto, which is down there. Maximize decentralization, minimize governance. I see governance as the way to break the system too much. So the idea is really to enable the participant to exchange, enable the participant to communicate, to have visibility on what's happening, to enable the interoperability between ecosystems. So you can have creation of data spaces. I will come back to that, between participants. The decentralized ecosystem comes from the fact that we want to enable that. And at the same time, with Gaiax Association, we don't want the association to be liable or responsible for operating the services themselves. So we had to find another way to enable this scenario while still being not liable. And that's how we come up with this architecture of decentralized ecosystem. More detail about that will be released in the September version of the architecture document. September version will be published mid-October, just the time for the layout to be done. The second milestone, the second item of the milestone will be building a fair knowledge graph. A knowledge graph, that's the ability for you to build, to crawl, to browse data that several actors will put together and build. And we want this knowledge graph to be findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So this is a screenshot from the June 2020 demonstrator, but it's still a valid representation of what is a knowledge graph. When I say verifiable and composable self-description, is because you want to be able to verify the information, and that's back to the definition I gave earlier of trust. So we cannot sell trust, but we can tell you that this data is verified and information is verified or verifiable. And composable, it means that you can swap with your entire layer stacks, software, hardware. Hardware is more difficult, but in infrastructure as a service, you can swap one component with another. That's the idea between composable. And for that, you need to have interoperability. How do we achieve those 2 criteria, verifiable and composable? That's through those 2 sets of qualification. So the first level, it's called Gaiax compliance. It's mandatory for every node within the graph I've shown before. That's really the key, the gatekeeper for enabling the interoperability in terms of identity, data, infrastructure, workload, licenses, identity. It's also the common ground for user to express their consent or to express how they want their data, their infrastructure to be used. Technically speaking, that's W3C credentials. Then you have a second level, Gaiax labels, level 2 and 3. That's a higher level of representation, and that's eligible to service only. Important thing about compliance, that's really one of the key added value of that September 21 release. You have 4 axes. The first one, file format and syntax. That's where you will define all the mandatory attributes, the policies, the consent, and for example, consent, that's back to the European Data Governance Act. So we are going to reuse a lot of the work being done by the European Commission. The validation of the identity, we will base ourselves on IDAS, which is the digital identity for Europe. Very important for all of the data semantic that we have expert there in the audience, the consistency of the information that you have in your graph. If you have a provider location in Germany and the jurisdiction, sorry, the opposite. If you have a service jurisdiction in Germany, but the provider is located not in Europe, then you have an inconsistency of the information. And that's something that you can verify when you have access to this fair knowledge graph. And lastly, the authenticity of the information. So if you claim to be GDPR or ISO 27001 or SecNumCloud, we need to be able to verify through that through various APIs. And finally, just to give an example of what could be a label, that, for example, could be the equivalent of the French label Cloud de Confiance, which has several levels, and set thresholds as opposite as compliance. That doesn't set thresholds. Compliance was really about making sure the information is there and verifiable. The label sets thresholds, for example, on security, immunity, dependency control. To give a bit of information and food for thought to the audience, so here is the technical roadmap for Gaiax. There is an overlap between each of those three pillars. So it's Q4, Q1, and then Q1, Q2, Q2, Q3. The first three pillars, and that's very important to start with that, the identity, the self-execution of the services, and making sure that we have a Gaiax compliance services, which is deployed, several typo here, sorry, deployed correctly without being able to run a rogue or malicious instance of these compliance services. Then later in the roadmap, we have the ability to build the graph, to query that, to enable inter-ecosystem exchange. And for the last step, we have service composition, probably early 2022, and also the interoperability score. I hope that gives you a quick overview of what we are doing and what's going to happen. For all SME startups listening to that speech right now, I would like to reiterate that we are really thinking about how they can onboard on that easily in a clear, pragmatic way. And if they want to contribute, here is the high-level roadmap that we are, where we are seeking expertise on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pierre, for these insights into the vision of Gaia-X, the milestones, and also the roadmap for the upcoming month. At the moment, we do not have any questions from the audience. So next up is the keynote by Peter Kraemer, head of the German Gaia-X Hub. Peter, the stage is yours.
Well, thank you, Luisa, for the kind introduction. I now have the unenviable task to follow up Pierre, because everything that I will say will look bland and basic now. So please bear with me. I'm going to tell you a bit about what we're doing on an ecosystem kind of level. From the very beginning, we have looked at Gaia-X from a user-centric point of view. You've probably all seen this this picture here, which basically shows how we are visualizing Gaia-X as it might be in the future. You have an infrastructure ecosystem at the bottom, which interconnects and infrastructure services and makes them interoperable. And on that, we're building a data ecosystem. And this data ecosystem is something that is very important on so many different levels, because this is really where value creation is going to happen. You see here data spaces. We have roughly taken them out of the European strategy on data, which was published in March of last year. And this is really something that is not only needed on a political level, but it's also needed on an industrial and on a commercial level. So in these data spaces, and Pierre has already hinted at this, this is really where the magic is going to happen. These data spaces, they will be decentral, they will be federated, and they will be where companies and organizations alike will come together to share data based on the rules and regulations and the technologies that Gaiax has set forth. Now, when the European strategy on data was published last year, it was centered more around having 10 data spaces for all of Europe. You have one data space in mobility where everyone who's contributed to the mobility sector will come together. It has now turned out very wisely, I might say, that there will be more than one data space on each of these different sectors, because the realities in these different sectors are very vastly different in Germany than they are, let's say, in France or in Belgium or anywhere else in Europe. So what we need is, when we have different data spaces, we need an underlying framework that allows us to make these data spaces interoperable. Because only if we make data cross company borders and sectoral borders, will we really be able to harness all the power that's within data sharing. So this is really where Gaiax will provide a great boon to digital economies. It's by providing this underlying architectural framework that is common to all of these different domains that will end up coming up with different data spaces. And it's also where Gaiax aims to bring about different advanced smart services, ranging from AI and to big data and automation and analytics, and all these different smart services that we might not even imagine for now. And it's something really where we see a very important aspect of Gaiax, is that we will use these different services to make a data economy a reality, which frankly we're not doing at the moment. Gaiax will offer the interoperability ontologies for this data exchange between and within these different data spaces to make data exchange really profitable for everyone involved. This will then enable collaboration in data-driven horizontal and vertical value chains. And in the long run, this is our common belief here, it's that it's going to encourage the emergence of sustainable business and innovation ecosystems that rely on sovereign, open, and transparent infrastructures. And from the very beginning, we've looked at Gaiax from a use case perspective. Like, what is a use case? We are fully aware of the fact that we are not reinventing the wheel here. There are a ton of projects that are already tasked with creating or even delivering at the moment parts of what Gaiax is trying to achieve. And we're trying to build an umbrella that will bring all of these different things together. And at the same time, the architecture that Gaiax is going to provide, the reference architecture, that is something that will have to be vitalized by people who have domain expertise and who know how business functions in these different vertical ecosystems, and who know how the business there might develop with the emergence of Gaiax as the underlying framework and architecture that will allow this sovereign data exchange on so many different levels. So these services then that will be available in the future range from freely scalable cloud offerings, which will be added by, for example, edge computing and high performance computing, so that we can make sure that AI and big data applications will be run efficiently in Gaiax ecosystems. Software programs will be provided there. There will be interfaces that will make this data exchange across company borders and across data space borders a reality, and there will be development tools that allow for the creation of tailor-made solutions for all of these different data spaces. Now, how are we going to structure this? We've looked at it from a very interesting approach, because we do believe that there's a bit of a top-down architecture development that will have to take place so that we can get guidelines and guardrails on what Gaiax is going to be. And at the same time, we have a bottom-up approach where we try to bring in all the requirements that different use cases and different sectors, data spaces have towards Gaiax, to make Gaiax as useful an ecosystem as early as possible to as many companies as possible. In the end, it's going to come down to the fact whether Gaiax is going to be able to provide a service that is useful for you, to anyone who's listening here. And we're trying to provide by setting up Gaia-X hubs to an avenue, a channel that allow you to work and articulate these different requirements in these different ecosystems. So these hubs that we've talked about now, they have three main functions. The first one is the first point of contact for everyone in a country. It's always easier for a farmer in Lower Bavaria to call me in Munich than it is to call someone in Brussels. So this is why we're trying to act as a bit of a navigator within the sometimes opaque, vague universe of Gaia-X. The second point is that we'd like to identify and align with all these different related activities that aim for the same goal, but might only work in different in special sectors, and we need to align these, of course, because well, we can't do it all on our own, and there's a lot of work already done. And the third one, and this is really where it's going to get interesting, is that we are trying to build ecosystems built on Gaia-X, which might end up coming together as data spaces. We are calling these working groups, which might be the predecessors to data space. We call them domains. In Germany, we have 10 of them, where 850 people from 450 different organizations come together to figure out what it is that Gaia-X will have to do in order to make these sectors a reality in data spaces for these different actors there. And it is a very low threshold participation and contribution that you're trying to envision here. It is free of charge. We are trying to make it as easy and productive for you to contribute there as possible, and it's an open invitation to everyone here. If you feel like you have in one of these different domains or ecosystems, if you have something that you would like to contribute, please do not hesitate to get in touch. Gaia-X will only ever be as good as the companies and people who are contributing to it. So please make your voice heard here. We are looking forward to hearing what you have to say. Gaia-X is far from done, but you should get involved now because we are currently aligning it with a common vision, and you should probably get involved if you like what you're hearing here and now. Now, with that being said, I am through with my presentation. I am looking forward to hearing a lot from you in the future. If you have any questions, we have, I think, 35 minutes left to discuss a lot of these. So thank you for listening today.
Thank you very much, Peter, for these insights into the Gaia-X data spaces and also the German Gaia-X ecosystem, and especially for your call to actively participate in this growing ecosystem. We do have one question from the audience that I would like to pass on to you. It's, will there be a financial data space for European fintech?
I think that's a question that you can answer as well, Luisa. We have a very active group and community of contributors in Germany and France, and they're working together doing extraordinary work to bring forth a financial data space. And Luisa, I think you should probably add to this because you know way more about it than I do.
Yeah, we are actually, as TechQuartier, heavily involved in the financial domain, the German financial domain. And this is currently led by the Hessischen Wirtschaftsministerium, Dr. Stefan Breed. So if you're interested in participating and joining, then please contact us. We are also working on two very important research projects there, which have actually already started. So yeah, just get in touch with us. All right, so I assume this is a good starting point to get started with our panel discussion now. In order to do so, I would first ask our participants to introduce themselves very briefly, who you are and why the topic of Gaia-X is relevant to you. Let's start with Emma.
Thank you so much, Luisa, and thanks you so much for inviting me to join the panel. Yeah, my name is Emma Wehrwein, and I'm working for the Eco Association of the Internet Industry in Germany, and I am coordinating the activities surrounding the Gaia-X Federation Services Development Project, and I think I will leave it with that for the time being. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Next up is Stefan.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me as well. I'm glad to be here. My name is Stefan Schaefer. I'm heading up the global product marketing at OVHcloud. And I'm based in Cologne in the DACH region, obviously, and I'm also active in the GAIA-X German hub of Peter.
Thanks. Next up is Jörg.
Yeah, hello. Thank you for the invitation. My name is Jörg Gottschlich from Meshcloud. We're a young company in Frankfurt, and we started with an open source-based cloud federation with decentralized data centers. So there's our connection right in our origins to GAIA-X. And today we build cloud governance solutions in large corporations with our software. And that's my background. Thank you.
Thank you. Last but not least, Ronny, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Ronnie Reinhardt. I'm working for Cloud&Heat Technologies. We are a cloud provider focusing on sustainable and secure solutions. And we've been involved in GAIA-X since the beginning. I've been active in several different working groups and are leading some of them. And that's why I'm here.
Thank you very much. I think now the audience should have a good overview who you are and what's your connection to GAIA-X. So I would really like to emphasize that the following discussion will now focus especially on the startup perspective. So we really want to find out what's in it for startups and how can they take part in the GAIA-X ecosystem, how can they shape solutions or contribute to solutions that are currently being developed. So my first question would be to Peter. We use the startup word or the word startup very loosely. So let's start by looking at the scope of this definition in the context of GAIA-X. How mature do companies need to be to engage and contribute to GAIA-X?
Frankly, not at all. Any company can and probably should contribute. Because in the end, I've said this before, but it bears repetition, GAIA-X will only be as good to the companies that will use it as the amount of effort they put in right now during development of it. Of course, you could wait until we have a mature product that is on the market, but I do believe that any company who shares the visions and goals and virtues that GAIA-X stands for should get involved now to figure out what it is that they can contribute and do with it in the future. So any company, no matter the maturity, no matter how many employees you have, no matter the turnover you have, should get involved. It's my very, very deep belief that we should get anyone on board, and it's our professed goal to make it as easy as possible for you to join and figure out what it is that you can contribute and get out of it.
Thanks. Having said that, Ronny, maybe from your perspective for startups wondering about the opportunities presented by GAIA-X, what would be the main one you would highlight as you're being part of the GAIA-X ecosystem currently?
Right. So I think GAIA-X is really the leading project concerning what is the next generation of the European cloud system going to look like. And working on that is very motivating. And we find that there are many like-minded people there where we can find many different ways of cooperating and driving this forward. So we've been heavily involved in different working groups. We've worked on the core documents. We've been in the technical committee. And for us, it makes a lot of sense because it's so many things in GAIA-X are similar to the things we would do anyways. And here we have a framework and a lot of other partners that we can work together with.
Emma, would you like to say something?
I think it's, thank you, Ronny, and I think I would agree, but I think what I would like to add is that I really think that GAIA-X is not especially a topic for the big ones out there, and I think that's why I think especially startups should participate and contribute already at an early stage, right, to actually get into the discussion. And right now we are really shaping the requirements, and I think Peter, especially in the hubs right now. So I think if you want to get something functional out of it, I think it's really important to get into the discussion, as Ronnie already elaborated on.
Yeah. I think actually there is two sides of it. The one is to say, okay, on the one hand, you can shape the situation yourself as a startup and work together with the whole group. But on the other hand, you can of course also rely on predefined things and say, okay, I have if I'm a startup, I don't need to cover everything that is dealing with data sovereignty, data security, etc. I can rely on other things that are done with or dealt with by other Gaia-X participants. So you can also benefit from the community by relying on the Gaia-X compliancy of others.
Pierre, I guess,
to,
yeah. Go ahead.
I wanted to add something that Gaia-X sometimes can feel like it's for big corporation only, but I would like to reassure and to emphasize that it's not. I'm convinced that in Europe we have all the knowledge and expertise to build something very incredibly successful. However, we might be lacking of a common framework to really enable the interoperability between not only the data, but also the infrastructure, the way we negotiate a contract, the way we monetize those contracts, and so on. So this is one of the, for me, Gaia-X added value for small, medium enterprise startups on how we create this mesh of expertise that we have in Europe. And this is a call for contribution also from the startups to let us know what they need.
I think that's a good starting point for Jörg.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to answer to that. So I like what Peter and Pierre and everyone said about the invitation to participate. And as I mentioned before in my introduction, we have a real strong connection to the idea behind Gaia-X, because we basically started something small with our very first project and beginning of our company, Meshcloud. However, what we found, because we tried to get into the process quite early over different state actors, it was very hard for us to really get a foot into the processes and to really be heard, given that we have a lot of experience also on how to for example, go to market with such a solution. So I think that would be some valuable experience for the development of a feasible and a viable solution. But what we found is that there are very large meetings and very hard to like heavyweight structures to get into, which is very difficult if you are a startup with a limited amount of resources and you have to focus on what is important. And always most important is, of course, your core business. And that's why I think it's kind of a bit hard to say you are invited and you can join and you talk about sovereignty a lot. But on the other hand, it's like, okay, it's just it feels like a large machine that is just going on. And of course, you can jump on it if you want to, and if it brings something to you. But it's very hard to get the feeling to have influence. And I would like to know, and hopefully we can find a solution on how we can improve on that, because that would be very important if we really want to join forces here.
Peter or Pierre, would you like to comment on that?
Oh yes, absolutely. I think it's now time for a view into the review mirror. The Gaia-X Association is the grail keeper of everything Gaia-X. That is still a rather young organization. It's only about half a year old now, and there are some growing pains that go with it. It is very regrettable that you have that you had this experience, but I think we've managed to streamline our own processes here, especially with the creation of more hubs in Europe that will allow an easier approach to this and to shed some light into the I think opaque Gaia-X universe that is not exactly boasting transparency in terms of processes until now. this is still a work in progress. We completely understand this, and it is tricky to find the right people to talk to, the right working groups to get involved with. But this is why we have the hubs. I mean, we are a bit of a navigator. We like to take your hand and bring you to the right people and working groups. And I think this is really something that is important, not only for small and medium enterprises, but also and especially for startups. Corporations, bigger companies will always have the resources and the stuff to get involved and to contribute. But it's the smaller ones who will eventually get the most out of Gaiax, because the federated approach and the sovereign data structures here that allow transparency and a bigger overview of the market will allow especially smaller companies to make more educated decisions on what services to acquire or which services to provide. So this is really something that's very dear to our heart. And anyone listening here, please, if you've had these sort of experiences where you felt like your voice was not heard, please get in touch again. We have improved considerably over the last couple of months, and we would like your input very much. So please give us a second chance in case you've had this. If you have not yet gotten in touch, please do so now.
I can.
Yeah, thank you. If I may just quickly. Yeah, sorry. Please. Yeah, go first.
I acknowledge the feedback, and I think this is a fair feedback. Unfortunately, this is, I believe, a bit true. If we put things into perspective, Gaiax, the first time it was mentioned, it was October 2019, so almost 2 years ago now. But the association, as Peter mentioned, it's already existing since beginning of March. So we have only 6 months life cycle. And if we put things into perspective, and we said the association has been existing for 1 hour, the management team was nominated about 14 minutes ago. And we are expecting to deliver the first Gaiax services within the next 10 minutes. That's just to give you an overview of the challenge that we have to face. And also we have to put all the processes from intellectual property management, onboarding of the user. The association was created with 22 members, and now we have more than 300 members. So the feedback that you gave is fair and right, and we are really trying to improve that. I'm coming from the software development. I've worked a lot in open source development tools and framework. It's all based on meritocracy, not bureaucracy. So that's what we try to change.
Okay, just a quick follow-up. Thank you for your contributions. That's what I thought, and I'm happy you mentioned open source projects, because we have large open source projects who show like an effective governance with a large number of people. But what they usually have is like they start with something small and then they increment on it, and on the way of incrementing it, they collect more and more users and more contributors, because people feel a benefit and they want to contribute to something, giving back benefits as well to others. So basically creating network effects with each other. And I wonder why why Gaiax was so different, like a top-down and very, very much classically planned initiative. And if it's planned, and that would be my hope, to get to a more open source or like a governance structure that we are used to from other open source projects, which is like really open, participative, and yeah, where you can contribute right away, basically, without, you know, signing documents, being a member, contacting a hub or something like that, because it's all barriers to contribution, actually.
Peter?
Really, my history degree comes into play nicely today. Gaiax was started from the political sphere. That is to say, it was the brainchild of people who said, yes, we do need something like this. So they said, we need digital sovereignty. We need something that can rival the offerings that the hyperscalers bring to the table from Europe. It went through different iterations. Started off as a European hyperscaler, then it moved towards the data Airbus, to what is now essentially Gaiax, an open and federated data infrastructure. And the transition from a political initiatives into an industry-driven, user-driven, not-for-profit association that is being fed by a network of Gaiax hubs, that is something that I think has been very rarely ever attempted. And I am very proud of what we've done so far with this, because even though we've had a few hiccups and we've gone through a lot of potholes in the way, I think that the achievement that we've gathered so far are rather extraordinary. And I can only say that, as Pierre just mentioned, especially considering the time that we've had a functioning Gaiax association as the gatekeeper, as the developer of Gaiax, it's really something. And I think we are on the right path towards having an open, a participative, and a more, well, let's call it open environment for Gaiax for everyone to work in. So this is definitely the path that we're on, and it's the future that I myself envision for Gaiax, because I do not want a closed shop.
Thank you, Peter. We also have some questions from the audience. So maybe let me start with the first one. Would it be possible to tell a user story of how Gaia-X might be used now or within the next 6 months? It would be helpful to have some specific use cases for a better understanding. Maybe that's a question for you, Ronny?
Sure, I can take this. So we've already worked on a demonstrator, and we have actually built something using the available information that we have. So that's what we typically like to do. And so one example is for a user story. There are different users. So one would be an AI company that wants to deploy a service on a certain cloud or in different clouds, and they also want to give decision-making power to their customers. So the customer of the AI service should be able to select the cloud provider underneath the AI service. So the process would be something like you can go on a portal, and select an AI service that you want to use, and then specify what the cloud should look like that you want to deploy the service on. So for example, should it have certain security certifications? Should it have certain sustainability certifications? And then you click on them, and then you can select one of the cloud providers that match your requirements. Then the AI service you want to use is deployed on this cloud platform. So that could be one of the many use cases that you can imagine. There are certainly many others, and this is just one example.
I have another use cases if you want more towards data.
Yeah, go ahead.
It was from the data space mobility, and the use cases was the following one. Right now, when you want to book a journey between different type of transportation, like plane or train, it's really hard for the booker, for the company, to know what are all the loyalty cards that you have in every of this company. And the loyalty cards, like for the benefit, for discounts, are very extremely important information that the company don't want to release. It tells you how many times the people have traveled, where, how many points they've gathered, and so on. However, from the user point of view, that's a pain when you want to book your travel from place A to B using different type of transportation, to have to go through each of those companies and enter your credit card, your reduction card, discount card every time. What data space and data, the architecture will provide, is the way to negotiate a contract between two parties, saying that I want to have access to the data of user Bob or John Doe one time within the next 5 minutes to do a query, negotiate that contract, give back the results. But the next time you will add or you will ask the contract, then the gateway will say, well, sorry, but you cannot just access the data again like that. Who are you? Are you a proven recorded identifier or consumer of that data? And you've already used that data before. So basically, there are mechanisms also that we want to implement to build that trust. Again, we cannot provide trust, but we can provide mechanism to enable that. Enabling companies that have critical private data to still share that in order for the customer to bring value. And you cannot simply just turn on your API and deliver and open everything. Otherwise, you will dump the data from one provider to another, and then there is a commercial issue, business issue with that. So this is why when we mention data spaces or data exchange with Gaiax, that's very critical to find the correct levers to enable those scenarios, knowing that you have a dilemma between exposing sensitive information that makes your business successful and creating new value for the users. So this example of data mobility and data space mobility was one.
Thank you, Pierre. We also have a question from the audience that goes into this direction. Maybe Stefan, you could elaborate a little bit on that. It's those who own data typically don't share it. What mechanism is Gaiax relying on to encourage or require those who have the data to share it via Gaiax?
Well, on the one hand, there are different reasons why you don't share data. So it can be technical and also security reasons why you don't want to have your data shared with other third parties. And it can also, of course, be a financial reason. But what Gaia-X can build, and that was one example that I also had in mind when we had the last question about use cases. For example, if you are in a healthcare environment and there is a healthcare startup, and a healthcare startup wants to build something with data which is coming from, for example, a health insurance, then Gaia-X can help you by creating open infrastructures and also secure infrastructures and also access methodologies. So that is one thing where you can say, I can find and create a secure way of sharing my data if I am a health insurance in this case, for example. And of course, I could also try to monetize it if I want to and say using the data is not for free. So if an application, a mobile phone application, a startup wants to create an application that is using my data, then it can also pay for it. So it's building a secure sharing infrastructure, but it also allows you in the end, if you want to monetize that secure data infrastructure sharing.
Thank you. I have one more question for you, Emma. Because I know you're pretty much involved into the Gaiax Federation services. So maybe to get a better understanding here, can you tell us a little bit more about these federation services, who develops them, and how can startups participate here?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, until now, we talk a lot of theoretical things regarding Gaia-X, and to really put now Gaia-X into operation, right? That's the main goal for the next month. Of course, there are some, let's say, minimal technical requirements and services necessary, and we've bundled all of these requirements into the federation services. And yeah, you can think of it as the connecting element to the infrastructure and the data layer, right? Because of course, within Gaia-X, I mean, Pierre, you also said it in your presentation, the idea is really to have a connected, a combined view of both layers. And yeah, we started a implementation project in the beginning of this year, and we are closely also aligned with the Gaia-X community and of course with Pierre and the AISBL to actually work on these federation services, and we have now specified the first set, and we are working now on realizing the first alpha release that will be available in the beginning of next year. And if you ask me who will develop these services, we are right now actually in a public tender procedure, actually recruiting our partners who will develop these services. And of course, it's a public tender, so everyone can submit their interest to actually develop these services for us. But also, if you are not involved into developing the services on a contractual basis, of course, we have big interest in sharing all of the source code and everything already from an early stage. So we are right now working with Pierre on setting up a space in GitLab to actually make all the source code available from the beginning of the development process, which will start for the first services already in the next couple of weeks. And there, of course, startups are happy to get involved and also to share their feedback. We are, next to that, we of course also are interested in working further in different iterations on the Federation services. And of course there we are also need some feedback also from people that are interested in getting involved. So these are ways to get involved for sure.
Thank you very much. Jörg?
Yeah, my question is there because I've seen this tender and like the whole process. So is it like you made the specification and now you look for someone to implement it? Or is it like starting a project that looks on how to develop what is necessary and what works basically along the way? Because the one part is like the traditional, we made a specification, then we implement it, and then it's ready, which is very, of course, since which we know in software engineering for 10 or 20 years. And the other one would be the agile approach that I say, okay, I want a minimum viable product that works, and then I start from that, and then I collect experience and reduce risk, and then I extend it further and further and further. And I think it's very important to set on the second approach, because then it's so much more likely that something comes out of the process that is actually beneficial to the user.
Yeah, of course. It's thanks for your question. Of course, it's a completely agile approach, and I think it's important to really also show results that in some way we need to freeze to actually start developing. But of course, we are also in alignment with Pierre and the architecture paper that is published in different iterations in I think every 3 or 4 months. So of course we are also aligning there. But yeah, it's I think important to now work on actual results. And to your question regarding the specifications, yes, the services have been specified in the first version in the beginning of this year, and it has been going through a community feedback process. So every specification is also published publicly, and is also available in GitLab soon. We are working on it right now, but you can also go to www.gxfs.de, where all of these specifications are published. And yeah, we are actually happy to get feedback and to really work on it. But it's really the first set, to be honest. And we actually hope, because of course everything coming out of this project is open source. So of course we hope that we establish also a strong open source community who will further develop these services for sure.
All right, looking at the time, I would really like to come to our final statements now. I have one question for each panelist. Please answer them very briefly. Emma, when are the first functional services of Gaia-X expected to be available?
So I think that's a tough question for me, but I for sure know that Catena-X, it's the Automotive Alliance, that is started a couple of weeks ago, and I think they announced to have the first services up and running in the beginning of next year for sure. But we also have, of course, different funded lighthouse projects that will start their work in the next couple of weeks or months, latest beginning of next year. And as I said, the Federation services will be ready soon, and of course everyone will then be able to use these to set up their respective Federation service in a really cost-effective manner. So I'm pretty hopeful that we will have the first services in the beginning to mid of next year.
Thank you, Emma. Next one is for Ronny. As a Gaiax member, what do you wish for the future cooperation with and the market positioning of Gaiax?
Well, my wish is that Gaiax remains an open community-driven initiative, or becomes even more so, so that we can create something that works for all community members, and also that we focus even more on creating prototypes, refining the prototypes, and focusing on the technical realization of Gaiax.
Thank you. Next one is for Jörg. What are the current pain points that you think Gaiax needs to address in the near future?
Well, I think there are two major points. The first thing is that if not yet, we need to get into like a real open source collaborative mode as fast as possible. And I still have a bit of a stomach here. I wish it would have been like that from the beginning, because I think it's exactly a matter of sovereignty that this is like an open process, and having these specifications already there in a black box manner is kind of a bad feeling. But let's look forward. I hope we will see that it opens up and that it's lower barriers to participate. And then on the market side, I think Gaiax needs to have also low barrier integrations for the users, so that they can easily use the service, access them, and that it's not like a technological island that is somewhere disintegrated with everything, but that it's very easy to be connected to existing infrastructure. That's the second one to be successful in the market.
Thank you very much, Jörg. The next one is to Stefan. In your opinion, what is the USP of the European values when it comes to cloud?
Well, if I look at the discussions that we as a cloud provider have very often with our customers, a number of customers in the public sector, in healthcare, in financial area are looking at very specific European solutions, and that has something to do with European guidelines, also with decisions like Schrems 2 or something like that. And I think Gaia-X can have a great USP if it really is fulfilling and ensuring the security of these ideas and these requirements. But it has not to compromise. So that's one of the things that is very important in the future. Not only the open discussions that we want to have, but we also need to be sure that we're not compromising on the main guidelines of what Gaia-X actually stands for.
Thank you, Stefan. Peter, why should startups and also corporates still engage in the German Gaia-X ecosystem?
Well, because Gaiax is still under development, it will only ever be as good as everyone who's involved in it and contributes to it. And well, I'm unreasonably excited for what's to come there, what corporates and startups alike are going to make of it, how they're going to implement new services, how they're going to use what Gaiax is offering to bring about innovation and new value creation in Europe. And that is something that really sticks out to me. So yeah, that's my point here.
Thank you very much. So last one is for Pierre. Could you please summarize the next big steps for Gaia-X within the next 6 to 12 months?
I'm trying, I think about that question a lot and trying to deliver the first federation services and to issue the first instance of the Gaiax conformance.
That was a quick one. Thank you.
Trying to be as quick, as sharp as possible.
So maybe let's take 2 more minutes to have one question from the audience, if that's okay with you, because we have a lot actually. There's one. There is one. I'm seeing also a lot of questions in the YouTube, in the chat, and I might want to comment on the. I've seen many questions about the type of format protocol that we are planning to use, and I believe it's very important to say that the specifications are being written right now. So the implementation and specific protocol that we are going to use
we don't know them yet for infrastructure, for data exchange. What we focus right now on is really building this framework and governance of that framework. It's very important to realize that for the last 10 years or 20 years, the industry already tried to do this challenge of exchanging data without much success. And one of the reasons is that when you have two participants, if those two participants don't recognize the identity of the other, or if these two participants don't exchange consent or policies with the same semantic and with the same meaning, then the exchange will not happen, even if you are using the same SOAP REST JSON API. So it's extremely important to have this top-down approach of we build the governance model, not of the association, but of the Gaiax ecosystem. And then we can deep dive and unroll the stack up to the infrastructure and bare metal.
Thank you, Pierre. Any more comments, final comments from the other participants? All right, then let's conclude it here. Many thanks to the audience for the interesting questions. Please feel free to get in contact with us afterwards via LinkedIn so that we can further discuss and elaborate on this topic. Many thanks, of course, also to our amazing guests. Thanks for taking the time. It was really interesting discussing this Gaiax topic with you today. I hope we can maybe meet here at TQ, maybe also physically, once again in the near future and see how Gaiax has elaborated and evolved further, and how startups will be included into this development in the future. Many thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.